It is time for a camp preview for the Colorado Buffaloes. I'm joined by Nikki Edwards of the CU Sports Report from the Rivals Network, and Nikki, we were talking before this, and you, me, Adam, Jake, I mean everybody, we've all done a ton of talking about this team over the last 9 months or so. I think all of us are kind of ready for camp, and let's just see. Like, not that we get to watch a lot of practice, but let's just see what this team actually does on the field, and let's get rolling with the season, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we can only put so many pieces together. We see the resume of these guys, what they've done at their prior schools, but a lot of these guys we haven't really met face to face. We've maybe had brief interaction with them at spring ball, but we kind of want to get to know them more, get to know their game more, so we can actually kind of see, the most like highly anticipated team in the country and what they're actually capable of and what their ceiling is. There's so many interesting facets with this team and so many new guys that we need to get to know and really start kind of answering a lot of the questions that we have going into camp.
Yeah, it's interesting because all the newness with this team, new roster, new coaching staff, all that. But the one thing that's the same with this team is every other CU team I've covered is that they're all confident, they're all excited about going into the season. So, and a lot of times it doesn't pan out. So, I'm not saying that it won't this time, but this team has the same opportunity the previous ones did. Go prove it now. That's what this time is for. Let's go prove it now.
Yeah, and especially last year was like my first season, like really fully full time covering a team, and I think me and I think all of us had a little bit of rose colored glasses. We had optimism going into into the fall. Like we believed what Carl Drell was telling us, and we didn't see it really firsthand with any open practices, but we saw a good team in the making. But I think that's kind of the magic and mystery of football, is that when they're in between the hashes and they're under the Saturday night lights, you never know what's going to go down. But I think there's a lot of good going into this season. It is very, very different, but there's a lot of good assets to where that confidence is a little bit more reinforced.
Yeah, it's hard to think back to last year and think that the narrative coming out of CU was, I'm not sure the quarterback position's been this deep in a long time at CU. Hey, Carl Drell finally has his coaching staff. This is setting up to be a really good season. It was obvious that the quarterbacking was still not very good. The coaching staff was dysfunctional in some ways, and Mike Sanford did a great job keeping it together after the firing. We've gone through all that stuff, but it didn't pan out the way certainly the narrative was coming out of CU. But we'll see on this year's team. Before we do that, real quick though, last week obviously CU jumps to the Big 12. Just want to get your initial thoughts. Now I'm wearing my Alma Bowl hat with a CU logo, Oklahoma State logo. So, they're going to be rivals here again soon. But, what were your initial thoughts on the jump?
Yeah, good vibes, good vibes with the hat. This is ultimately like what CU needed to do. I mean, you're seeing Arizona, Utah, and ASU in these conversations now because of CU's move. They recognize that they're not going to have as lucrative of deals if they stayed in the Pac-12. I think a number yesterday on Twitter, like I think it'll be strictly like streaming services and 20 million per school. That's what the commissioner is allegedly kind of putting together with that deal. But this is all in the works, and this is being talked about today. But I think they see the numbers within the Big 12, like 32 million per school, like that. That is ultimately what CU needs to really, grow their exposure and their program, everything that Rick George said within the press conference. This is ultimately a move that CU needed to do. And it just makes sense. Like, it makes sense, like them making a return and kind of reigniting these rivalries. And also, Coach Prime is really tapping into the Florida pipeline, but that Texas recruiting and the points that they touched on during the press conference is going to be so important, and playing in those 3 time zones. And
yeah,
I think basketball is going to be so fun. I think it's going to be so fun to watch as well. I think that's another facet of it. But times are changing. We are, the conference realignment. You need to stay up to date with it and really do what's best for your program. And I think if they were to stay within the Pac-12, they would have got their cut, but it wouldn't have been as, I think, complimentary as moving to the Big 12.
Yeah, and I think Rick George mentioned it too. It's more than just media rights. Everybody focuses on that, but the basketball shares, NCAA tournament shares, have been much higher in the Big 12 because it's a better basketball conference than the Pac-12 has been. So there's some other financial factors in there, just stability as well. I'm excited about it. I know people are going to miss some of those nicer LA or LA and Oregon and Seattle type trips that you get in the Pac-12. They're maybe more exciting than going to Manhattan, Kansas, or Ames, Iowa. But I think the football game is going to be more exciting, and I think it's overall I like the stability for CU. But that's next year, and we're going to talk more about that. Probably a year from now. This year's team, real quick, going into camp. Obviously, camp is going to be about position battles, right? We know that Shedeur Sanders will be the starting quarterback. We know that Travis Hunter is probably going to start in 2 spots. There's a few things we know, but not very many. What is the position battle that you're most looking forward to seeing?
I am really curious how things are going to shake down in the secondary, specifically, with the starting safeties. Shiloh Sanders is a really kind of interesting piece where, we talked to Charles Kelly and he's trying to push him to do things that like draftable NFL players he would want to see out of those kind of guys, and kind of seeing that like high expectation kind of paints a picture of where he's at from a talent perspective. Cameron Sliman Craig, like I think he was really effective during spring camp. We saw a lot of flashes from him, an interception, like really, moves fast from sideline to sideline. I like Travis J as well, FSU. Like those FSU guys kind of have a lot going for them, just moving from Florida State to Colorado. When you bring that Southern talent into the West, it's so apparent. You can really kind of see the disparateness of that. But I really like, I don't know, I'm interested to see where Trevor Woods lands. There's so much depth within the secondary that, we kind of need to unpack and see for ourselves. But, in terms of, taking that starting role and kind of being that like anchor down in the downfields, it's kind of really anyone's game at the moment. But I think Sliman Craig is definitely a contender. And I don't know. I mean, we'll see what Trevor Woods is capable of. But, he was really a staple within the Buffs defense and was really one of the bright points. And I think with this new knowledge that he's absorbing from Charles Kelly and from Coach Prime, that could be really helpful in his development and kind of seeing the field a little bit differently. So yeah, safeties are interesting. Travis Hunter, of course, is going to start. I wonder how I think another question too is how we're going to split Travis Hunter's time. He's a really go and get it guy. Like he's going to ultimately do his assignments and what he's told to do. But, hopefully this doesn't maybe exhaust him. Maybe I'll see how he goes from quarter to quarter. But, he has so much there that the Buffs fans should be excited for. I think linebackers are really interesting. Like Demoy Kennedy, we've asked about him when we were in Vegas, and, bringing an Alabama guy into the Buffs is always intriguing. And I think Charles Kelly said he was kind of incrementally getting there, but that injury, unfortunately, put him back. So I think since we haven't really talked about him too much in the spring, I think he's going to be someone that we hear a lot in the fall. But yeah, I'm going to put that question to you as well. Who do you think what position battles are you intrigued by?
Well, I like your answer because I think the secondary is huge because I think there's some good talent there. I'm just curious where it's going to shake out. But to me, it's offensive line and really defensive line too. But like offensive line to me, I look at it and there's so many guys that started in college last year, but there was at lower levels, right? Whether it's junior college All-Americans, Tyler Brown was an FCS All-American, but there's only 2 guys that played Power 5 football, and they were both here at Colorado. Van Wells and Jared Christian Lichtenhan, and we know that was not a great offensive line last year. Now, I like those 2 players. I think that they were 2 of the best players on that line. I think that I project them as starters here, but I'm curious to see how that offensive line shakes out because I did a position preview this week. I projected the starting 5, but it was hard for me. Some of the guys I didn't have in there, like, well, yeah, I could see that guy starting. I could also see that guy starting. And so I just don't know how good that line is. I think it's such a key to the season that I'm looking forward to that. And then defensive line, same thing. I mean, I don't know who's going to start. They've got a lot of guys who have come from places that they haven't played a ton, but they're young guys. Bishop Thomas was Florida State Scout Team Player of the Year last year, but he didn't play. How good is he? Amari McNeil from Tennessee was a backup, didn't play a ton. How good is he? I think these guys can be good, but
Mm-hmm.
I think it's such an unknown with both those lines, and it's such a key for both those lines that I think this fall is huge in the
Yeah.
trenches.
I think when looking at the offensive line, I think guard is up for grabs. Like I see, at tackle, Savion Washington,
Mm-hmm.
Lichten Hahn, and at center, Van Wells. I mean, Hank Zelinkus is the only other center, but I can't imagine them wanting to put in a freshman.
I think Landon Beebe can play there too. The transfer from Missouri State, he could be a guy that's there. And I know Jack Bailey has snapped in the past, but I agree with you. I think Van Wells, that's his job to lose. But it's that whole interior. I think is going to be intriguing to watch.
Yeah, there's a lot of like flexibility across like Tyler Brown. I mean, I was looking at I think his size, like all of them have like great size. I mean, 310 pounds, like that is definitely a solid base to have within the interior.
Yeah.
He's someone that, brings a really positive presence from a, personality standpoint, but also I think, question marks, just where do these guys land and what can these FCS guys really kind of anchor down within that line? So definitely interesting. And also, I think the running back room, yes, it is small, but there's so much like talent just within this like small group. I think someone that hopefully, I mean, I could see Dylan Edwards like really just like making like a huge jump. I mean, I remember when we were at the spring game and he had that like 30+ yard carry and he was kind of like dodging through tackles and really pushing through that defense. It's like you see flashes like that and hopefully it'll, translate into the fall, but he's such a compelling piece of that running back room to where, you don't want to discount these freshmen that are coming in because there is so much talent across the board. But when you pinpoint a few of those guys, Dylan Edwards could really, I don't know if he's going to necessarily be a starter, but I could see him being really active in that rotation if he can really, bring it. And I think we've seen kind of flashes of that.
Yeah. That's my favorite room. I've always been a running back fan. That was my favorite position growing up. And I like this room. Like when I did my position preview, I actually had I did my projected depth. I had Anthony Hankerson 5th. And I hated doing that because I really like Anthony Hankerson and think he's a starter caliber running back at some point. And so I think they've got 4 or 5 starting caliber running backs. So I'm intrigued by that room. But one last thing, we're going to talk all through camp, right? And so we have a whole bunch of stuff. But going into it, let's each give one player that has not been talked about a lot. Now, this is going to be hard because everybody's talked about every transfer that's come in, right? But the players that have not been talked about a lot, just one each that you think is going to be impactful this season. Now, obviously, Shadour's not on here. Travis is not on here. Cormani's not on here. Mm-hmm. What's a player that's not been talked about a lot that you think could be a big impactful player?
Oh man. I mean, I think, okay, let's just pick one. I would say Jordan Dominic. I think we do talk about him, but we don't talk about him enough when we're looking at like the D line, and he is going to be so effective. I think there are high expectations from him coming in with the, leading the SEC third in sacks last year. Like there is so much production there. And we saw it in spring practice, the way that he's such an effective pass rusher, the way that he gets around, those big guys on the offensive line is, it's quite amazing. And I think he has that production there where he's going to be such an effective pass rusher. And again, that SEC talent, bring it out to the Pac-12. You really see how different it is and how much of an impact, that kind of Southern talent is across that line. Jordan Dominic is such a compelling piece and really going to be, I think, a starter throughout this year. And he's, quarterbacks are really going to be kind of scrambling, trying to move around from him. I think it's kind of like a lofty comparison, but there like are flashes of like maybe like Nick Bosa there and like some really effective NFL pass rushers. He has such a positive presence. He is a really, good person from what we briefly talked to him, but he earned his number in the spring. And, that is a testament to, where he's going to land. And of course, he's an older guy too. The experience is there, the talent is there, and he's going to be such an important piece to their defense.
Yeah, he's certainly a guy that's not getting enough attention as far as like the preseason all conference list, things like that. I'm going to go with Jaquez Robinson from Alabama, who I love this guy. Had a chance to interview him. I think he's a really interesting young man, really good young man. But I'm intrigued by him as a player, and he's another guy that worked with Charles Kelly, was developing. Played behind a lot of really good talent. I mean, he came into Alabama and played behind Pat Surtain, who's now with the Broncos and one of the best corners in the NFL. So this is the type of guy he was playing behind. Hasn't had a whole lot of shot to play. He's got such position for versatility. He's going to be at safety, at corner, nickel, things like that. I'm intrigued by where he plays. I think he's not the best player on the team. I don't think he's going to be the best DB, maybe even one of the top 2 DBs, but I think that, he's a guy that is going to be all over the place. He's going to be such a key to this defense. I'm excited about him. I think that his position versatility is going to make him a really intriguing piece for that defense. So we'll see with him, but I love the Alabama guys, Demoy Kennedy and him. I think they're going to be such big keys.
Yeah, I agree as well. I talked to Robinson as well during the offseason, and everything that you said, I really agree. He just needs like that opportunity and really that stage to really showcase what he has to offer, because he was a 4-star coming out of high school, and him and Charles Kelly share such a long relationship. He was recruiting him like in high school, and they worked together for about 5 years. And I think Charles Kelly wouldn't have brought him over if he didn't see what.
Right.
Where he could actually be and kind of that versatility across the secondary. So I think he's really going to shine, and it's good to see him have an opportunity to really kind of bring, have that exposure and show what he's actually capable of.
Yeah. Well, there's a ton of players we're going to talk about throughout fall camp. Those are just a couple and just a little primer for all you fans. But Nikki, I'm glad we could hook up and do this, and look forward to seeing you at practice tomorrow. And we'll see you a lot over the next month.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brian.